Hi guys and welcome back, and today we get on with building the Airfix 1/72 scale Supermarine Spitfire, part of the beginner's build along.
Soll das heißen, dass Ihre Verluste kritisch sind?
Unsere Verluste sind schrecklich, wir haben seit Ewigkeiten keine Modellbausätze mehr geliefert.
Zur Sache! Was soll das heißen?
Die Hersteller haben die Liefertaktik geändert.
Taktik geändert? Inwiefern?
Herr Richtmarschall, die Lieferungen sind eine Katastrophe, die völlig durcheinander geraten ist. Einige kommen auf der Straße, andere auf der Schiene. Wir wissen nie wie, aber sie kommen normalerweise kurz vor dem versprochenen Datum an.
Aber nicht nah genug, um Deckung zu geben, wie?
Sie selbst wären ein Sustelfahrer, Sie sind immer auf der Pisse. Ja, ein verdammt heißer Sustelfahrer. Kein Pisskopf.
Der Dicke, wenn ich darf, habe ich einen Vorschlag.
Aber ich rede davon!
Kommunalsong, wir Deutschen sind berühmte Spielzuhersteller.
Aber es ist so schwierig, alle Bestellungen zu verfolgen.
Du bist ein Schwachkopf. Es gibt tausende von alten dicken Männern, die sich auf sie verlassen. Der Bau von Kits kann erst beginnen, wenn die Regale voll sind.
Aber bitte, meine Herren, ich muss da hart zu Ihnen sein. Ich bin doch hier, um Ihnen zu helfen. Gibt es irgendetwas, was ich für Sie tun kann? Föhn, Falke.
Ja, Herr Richtmarschall, besorgen Sie mir Airfix Spitfires.
So we'll kick off with the painting, and first things first, I decided I needed some sort of stand for the plane to rest on and sometimes be held by when I'm painting. So I just found a couple of scrap pieces of MDF and an old meat skewer. So to get it into the plane, I'm just going to use that hole that the clear part goes into and very carefully drill that out very slowly, just doing a few revolutions at a time until it went through. And that hole is the actual perfect diameter for the meat skewer. And now just painting the engine exhausts, and these were very delicate where they came together. It's all one piece, but as you see, I managed to effortlessly snap one off. So that happens, and we've got our Tamiya glue to fix stuff like that, so it's just a matter of whacking some glue on and holding it steady for a while and making sure it was all lined up again, and it's been as good as gold ever since. So I realised after I'd painted these both white that of course the underside of one of the wings will be black. So as the undercarriage will be retracted, I need to have the outside part of one of these wheels painted black. Just a matter of putting second coats on to all of the other little small pieces. I'm just painting all of them black. And they'll require just a little touch up when we cut them off the sprue to ultimately stick onto the plane. In the back wheel, a little bit of black for the tyre, and we'll get some of that duck egg colour in there as well. I mixed the duck egg and the black together to get that grey in the middle, and then just going around touching up with the black again on the wheels. And finally just touching up a couple of spots on the engine exhaust where the glue might have shown from my earlier breakage. So I really like the colour scheme of the underneath of the plane that's on the packet with the black wing and the white wing, but there's a pretty distinct line between the two, so we're going to use just some normal painter's masking tape. This is the low tack stuff, and I make it low tackier by taking some of that off by repetitively just putting it onto my clothing. which is probably not ideal. Don't let the good lady wife see you doing this sort of stuff. But that takes a little bit of the tackiness off it as well. And I think the biggest secret to using this stuff is to not leave it on too long. The longer you leave it on, the greater risk you have of it removing some of the paint that it is stuck to. It's just a matter of looking for the logical places. I'm looking for panel lines as sort of a aid to guiding me where to put the tape. It seems a logical space to break the patterns. So just watch this for a little while. It's all pretty self-explanatory, and I'll be back in a tick. And the other thing I should mention is burnishing. So you can see me here just using the end of a paintbrush. And that's just to make sure that the tape is as closely adhered to the surface as possible. It's a double-edged sword. Again, as I said, you don't want it stuck there so it's going to lift paint off, but you need it firmly enough in place that paint isn't going to leach underneath it. So you just have to follow your gut with that, and practice and experience will tell you what works and what doesn't work overall, but just a light burnishing should see you through. And then it's on with the paint. So the black paint, the same as we've done with the undercoating and the other side of the wings, mixed with a little bit of water so it's nice and runny, but not too runny that you don't get coverage. So again, that's a judgment thing with time. And the main thing here is painting with a brush is always more difficult because you're likely to leave brush marks. So I'm trying to keep the paint thin, and I'm also trying to, as hard as possible, paint in just the one direction so you don't have that sort of swirl of brush marks. And as I get closer to the actual mask area, it is important to try and keep the brush not too loaded with paint. So you don't want a huge amount of paint on the brush because that's more likely to leach underneath the tape, and also give you a nasty line if a thick line of paint builds up against where the tape is. So keep it thin and keep it all going in the one direction, and that should minimize the brush strokes that we see. And just another little tip, if you're using these sorts of lids to use your paint, I just whack another lid on top of that lid that's got my paint, put something a little bit heavy on it, like my Tamiya glue, and that will stop it from evaporating. And you find that it's, within reason, you can't leave it for hours, but if you're just waiting for that to dry for 15 or 20 minutes, then it's good to go. And here we are, look, just putting on the second coat so you can figure that one out, and we'll come back and have a look at it at the end. Now, one of the great joys of masking is, of course, unmasking, and that's when you get to pull the tape off. So the secret is to try and pull it smoothly, gently, and away from the paint that you've just put on. So don't pull it towards the paint that you've just put down, pull it away from the paint that you've just pulled down. And if you're careful and slow, which I'm being very careful and very slow, you shouldn't be too bad. Now there's a couple of little blemishes there that can be easily fixed up, but by and large it's a pretty good straight line. Little one there, a little one there, but I'm not unhappy with that. So we'll unmask this and then we'll mask again for the back part, the tail, and have a look at how that goes as we prepare then to put the camo pattern on the upper surfaces. So again, just checking the painting reference on the back of the box to see how much of the undercarriage colour you can see on the top. And then what I'll look for here on the actual model itself is some corresponding sensible panel lines that might be useful as a guide. Won't always be perfect, but in this case it's not too far off the money, so that's what I've gone with. And the other thing that I'd point out is that when you're masking, you don't necessarily have to cut the perfect piece of masking tape and get it done in one hit. I'm happy to use lots of little pieces. The end result is cover the areas that you need covered well, and the rest takes care of itself. So don't get too stressed out about, oh, I haven't cut the exact right piece. You can always add to that with other little pieces to get it right. So we'll get on with painting the camo now of the Spitfire, and I have to confess I've never done this before in my life. Any earlier Spitfires made in my youth would have all just been painted one colour. I seem to recall I had a regular habit of painting things very shiny silver, which probably would have been reasonably horrible. Anyway, same as we've done in the past, we're using the green paint with a fairly small amount of water included to make it nice and runny. And I decided, and again, hey, I am not an expert, but this was the way I thought would go the best, and I think it might be the best for beginners, is just to do the whole surface that needs camo in green to start with, and then do a couple of thin coats of green on that, and then come back in with the brown to do the pattern effect, if you like, with the brown paint. So I'll shut up for a while, hopefully a nice bit of music on, and you can see this going down, and I'll pipe up occasionally if I need to clarify anything. So that's what it looks like after the first coat. And here's the second coat going on. And this is what it looks like after the second coat's dried. And now we get started with the tricky bit, which is, well, tricky in my mind anyway, which is doing the brown solid parts to form the camo. So again, with a fairly diluted paint, just sort of sketching out the areas that I want to cover, so like outlining them, I guess. Basically following the box art, but not capable of replicating it faithfully. I don't have the skills. Just getting that overall feel of where it's brown and where I need to fill in. One of the things you need to be aware of when you're painting with the diluted brown paint is it can wander off in its own direction, so just keep checking in the area to make sure that your paint is where you want it to be. And if it has gone over onto the other side or onto the green where you don't want it, a wet Q-tip should be enough if you get onto it quick enough to get that out of the way without doing any damage. Now, it's at this point that I realised that I'd cocked up, and the underneath of the two tail fins should have been the same colour as the underneath of the wing. So, not a disaster, but just shows if you don't pay attention. I was looking at the colour call out and still managed to mess it up. So, same routine, a couple of thin coats, and being careful now on the opposite side to make sure that the lighter colour wasn't bleeding through onto the surface. So we'll get on with putting the rest of the brown camo paint on. I'll try and find a nice little bit of music while we have a look at that, and come back when it's time to unmask. So just the same as we did earlier, just carefully peeling off the tape now, making sure as far as possible to pull away from the area that we've just painted. And by and large, pretty happy with that. There are a couple of little bleed spots on the paler colour, which we just went in and touched up with the diluted paint. I'm pretty happy with this so far, so there's still some work to do. But by and large, this would be what I call getting all of the base colouring down in a build normally. And now where do we take it from there? Right, so now it's time to get on with the decals, and I'm just going to start at the tail area and get the first couple on there. Just carefully cutting them away from the sheet with the sharp blade. Now you'll notice a lot of the decal sheets are always numbered. I like to take those little numbers off only because I've found in the past that they can detach while they're soaking and attach themselves to your decal, which you don't want. Now, there are a lot of decal setting and softening solutions, and if you've been doing it for a while, you'll find your favourite. In the spirit of this being the beginner's build, I'm just adding the old-fashioned white vinegar to the water, which also has the effect of softening the decals. Not as good as the stuff you buy from the shops. You might have to do a few more coats, but it works there, and a little bit in the water just helps to have them come off softly, if that makes sense. Now, it was only when I was cutting all these off that I realised there was this decal here that's meant to go around at the end of the plane there, which is what we masked off earlier and painted. And I'm glad we did, because it's not a colour match for what would be the rest of the undercarriage. So I'm glad I didn't realise it was there, and I'm glad I didn't use it, because I'm happy with having the decal stay on its sheet and just use our painted version. So very carefully then, just following the colour guide on the back of the box, and you don't need me to explain this to you, putting the decal on, painting a little bit of the solution on, and letting it dry a little bit, and then giving it a firm roll, trying not to move the decal, just trying to push down and squeeze any of the water out, and also any of the air or the wrinkles. And I have to make a confession here, and I didn't really notice it until a day or so after the event, and way too late to try and do anything remedial with the decals. But I got these on a little bit low. I reckon they're about a mil and a half too low. So I'm just going to have to live with that every time I look at it. But yeah, need to just pay really close attention. And I think I may have inadvertently pushed it down when I was rolling it with the Q-tip, or I might have just got it wrong from the start. But minor thing, but it's just a little sitting too low on the side of the fuselage. And once the decals have basically dried out and set, what I'm doing here is just using the pure white vinegar and painting it on to hopefully soften them, and that helps them settle down onto the model itself and fit in with the contours of the model, or in this case the panel line. So as I said, it's probably not as good as decal softening solution, but it's a similar nature, and it just needed quite a few coats, I think half a dozen coats. Let it dry, paint it on, let it dry, and rinse and repeat a few times. It worked pretty well in the finish. So now I'm doing probably the fiddliest little piece, which is painting the metal framework for the glass canopy. And yeah, look, just a matter of being super patient, letting it dry. I don't try and paint the whole thing in one go. I just painted a few little sections and let that dry, so that as I rotated it around, I wasn't holding on to wet paint. And I don't know if this is one of the ones you can leave on the sprue to paint, because they're a little bit more brittle, so cutting it could do a bit of potential damage to the paintwork that you've already done. Other guys will mask these or use tape to mask off the glass areas. That's more likely when they're spraying it, but you could certainly still do that. That seems like a lot of effort for me, and I'm fundamentally lazy, so I'd rather just take care and clean up occasional overspills with another clean brush with a bit of water or even a toothpick to help scrape it off. So nothing brilliant in the technique here, just take your time and it will pay off. So here I'm just mixing up the brown with a little bit of black just to make a slightly darker brown. The reason I'm doing this is to make a wash, so I don't want the plane to be filthy, and the starter kit doesn't come with the paints to do really sort of technical and complicated weathering. So I just sort of want to take the brand newness out of it without necessarily making it filthy, although I might have gone a little bit overboard on the lighter underneath areas. But this is all pretty self-explanatory. I started off by just trying to follow the panel lines in particular, but that didn't work particularly well. So you'll see as it unfolds that I just decided, I'll just splash it on and let it sit there for a little while, and then remove the bits that I don't want with a Q-tip with a bit of water on it. And that works okay as long as you don't leave it too long. I left a couple a bit too long and I thought I was in trouble, but I used the vinegar and that worked quite well to bring it back. So a bit more music, watch this, and we'll come back with what's almost towards the end of it now. So now we're into the finishing up stage, and this is just a little bit of sponge that I ripped off our wet palette corner and mixed up a bit of grey with the black and the lighter colour, and just, trying to simulate a little bit of wear around where the pilots and the crew would have been jumping up onto the wing route in particular. Look, it's not brilliant. It's a token effort at best, but it looks all right in person. The good thing about the acrylics, of course, is a bit of water. You can repair any over painting. Here, I'm just trying to grey the exhausts a little bit to just a bit of colour variation, really, and represent a little bit of the smoke effect that might have been happening with these guys. And then just the test fitting, and what I found with the test fitting is it was a beautiful, snug little fit, and always like to avoid using glue, so I didn't. I just snapped it in, and it was good and stayed there. And on to fitting the wheels now. So if you look at the instructions, it gives you a front-on and a side-on view, and the front-on view says there's an 86-degree angle, and the side-on view says there's a 68-degree angle, and quite frankly I had no clue how I was going to calculate or measure those angles, and the last time I saw a protractor was a good 46 years ago when I flamed out of pure and applied maths rather brilliantly. So I just stuck them in the holes with a little bit of glue, and then had a good look at them, eyeballed them to see if they looked about right, and I thought they looked about right. So there's not a lot of room for movement once you get them in the guide holes anyway, so I think you could easily overthink this bit for the type of kit that it is. It seemed to look okay. I used the lower prop as my guide to the centre to see if they were symmetrical, and that helped a little bit, and even my own critical eye, I haven't really seen anything wrong with them ever since. So I just gave the canopy interior a bit of a clean up with a damp Q-tip in case there was any dust or fingerprints or oil in there or whatever. And then the dry fit of the canopy just to make sure it's still fitted in place properly. Now we had that looking pretty good before any of the paint went on, and I was somewhat perplexed and surprised to see that it wasn't looking as good as it had pre-painting. So now, we put very thin layers of paint on this, so I'm not sure why that happened, or if in handling it I've squeezed it and maybe changed the shape of the hole. Regardless, there's a few little gaps there that are too big for me to ignore. Now, it didn't need much because it was like a 0.2 of a millimetre gap, so very carefully just removing a little bit of material with the sharp blade, and then as best as I could get in with the small sander, and then it's just test and take off a little bit at a time. You can always take off more, but it's more challenging to put stuff back on. And once we got that right, again, like the exhaust in the final test fit, it fitted so snugly that I couldn't see any advantage to risking spoiling the clearness of the canopy by using glue. So I've just snapped it in, and it's fine. And now just threading the guiding wire through, and I thought this would be actually much harder than it ended up being. Just wrapped around itself really, and again, I think I just put a drop of super glue on either end just to make sure it didn't unravel. So, yep, pretty self-explanatory. And happily this was another no glue scenario, it just clicked into place. And you might remember right at the very start, I just cut the tiniest of notches in the back of this post to accommodate the wire. Now, I habitually do a search of all the sprues when I think I've finished, just to make sure I haven't forgotten anything, and of course I had forgotten something at the glass lens in the undercarriage where we've been using the hole for our temporary stand. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but in the finishing up, I've pretty much put the parts on in reverse order of most likely to get knocked off. And this is the final little part, and I have, again, just shoved that in the hole. No glue required, which I was rapt about because it's going through the decal, and I thought that could end up very badly. And in putting on that last part, I managed to snap the guide wire, which was in fact only one strand of that incredibly thin wire that we got out of the iPhone charger cable. So I did fix it, but I used 4 strands. It's a little bit thicker, which you'll see in the photo here. And so here she is, and not the traditional final reveal for my normal reveals. Instead of going out on the spinning wheel a couple of times and then some close-ups, so just a couple of pictures here, because as I was building it, I was thinking, how do I want to display this? And in fact, I've really enjoyed this. This has been a great kit to build, and it's been fun to do these videos. And I've had some really good comments and some emails from people as well, which I've loved. And so hopefully it's helped 1 or 2 people who have watched it, which is great. But I just really enjoyed making a model plane, and I haven't done it for decades. So I typically build armor, and I like doing figures, but I just love the plane. So as I've been building it, I've been thinking about what I might build next. Now, the next one is still up for conjecture, but I want to do a diorama, and I'm thinking it's the Pershing tank in 1/35th scale. But I think every alternate build might be one of these little 1/72nd scale kits, and then I've sort of had to think about how I want to display them. So the next video, which is not very far away from this going up, this should probably go up on Friday night or Saturday. The final reveal will go up not that long after that, but it'll also include the making of the display base. Very specifically designed so I can fit 8 of them on the shelf that I've got in mind for display. Therefore, I've got the capacity to build 8 1/72nd scale World War II planes. And what I think I'll do is I'll do iconic planes of World War II. Now, I can already think of a couple that I really want to do. I want to do the BF-109. I want to do the Mustang. I think the Mitsubishi Zero. So sort of get a national spread. So that would give me 4 without blinking. And then I'm thinking, what would the other 4 be? And I'm thinking that might be something that you guys can help me with. What you guys think might be considered an iconic fighter plane of World War II. There's the Russian Yak, and there's probably other ones that, the Hawker Hurricane probably deserves a Guernsey, the ME-262, lots of them. So anyway, so that's about it. Just now time to say goodbye. So thanks very much for watching. Like if you liked, subscribe and ring the bell to be reminded, and please share, because that all really helps me. And as always, guys, looking forward to your comments very, very much, and also looking forward to getting the final reveal video up in the not too distant future, and the display base and the making of all that. So take care, everyone. Look after yourselves and be kind to each other, and I will catch you in the next one.